Hello everybody and welcome to part 14 of What If Izuku Midoriya Had the Omnitrix. Or well, this part is technically What If Albedo Was in My Hero Academia, because it focuses on him for once. Yes, we're starting a new arc from a fresh new perspective. I hope you guys like the thumbnail, by the way. So yeah, if you enjoyed this episode and the style it's made in, don't forget to hit that like, subscribe if you happen to be new, and you can always leave a comment, or check out my Discord, link in the description below. All that said, please enjoy the video. Some time ago, on a planet far away, in a place called Galvan Prime, the first thinker continued his work. For a time, there had been rumors that the Omnitrix had been found, that it had a user. Recently, after the tyrant Vilgax was defeated, these rumors were proven to be true. News of a child, worse, a teenager, being the new wielder of this powerful device instead of the intended user, reached the planet along with many others. "What's the meaning of this, Azmuth?" a Galvan demanded to know as he entered into the room where the first thinker was conducting his research. "What is it now, Albedo?" Azmuth, the first thinker, asked his assistant. This wasn't the first time Albedo had burst into his lab, and frankly, it was annoying to be disturbed in such a way. "You allowed the Omnitrix, your greatest creation, to end up in the hands of an Earthian child? A child? Why would you allow such a thing? I thought it was intended to end up with the plumbers," Albedo exclaimed. He had helped with the creation of this weapon. If anyone should have it, it should be someone responsible who could bring actual change with the device. The Omnitrix was key to Izuku Midoriya's DNA, a great plumber, one of the greatest, Azmuth explained, turning back to his experiments. This conversation wouldn't need much of his attention, so he could still continue his research. It was through causality that it ended up in the hands of this child. He had enough of a genetic match to bond with the device, that's all. "But why allow him to keep it?" Albedo asked, angry that something he helped build was now possessed by such a being. "Why not remove the Omnitrix from his possession? You can't allow the most powerful weapon in the universe to stay in the hands of a child!" For the 372nd time, the Omnitrix is not a weapon. It's an incredible device meant to allow for more peaceful coexistence and to bring a species back if the need arises, Azmuth explained, keeping most of his focus on his research. It is not a weapon. "But why not create more and give it to many people so that peace can be achieved?" the assistant asked. "That's the most idiotic idea I've ever heard. There must only be one Omnitrix. If there were more, the results could be catastrophic. The Omnitrix is safe in the child's hands, at least for the time being," Azmuth said. His assistant tried to refute the point, but Azmuth cut him off, saying, "I am the first thinker, the smartest mind in 3, possibly 5 galaxies. I assure you, I know what I'm doing." Not satisfied with the conversation's results, and knowing that Azmuth wasn't paying much attention, Albedo sneaked over to the room's computer. He downloaded a copy of the blueprints of the Omnitrix to a personal device before leaving the room. If Azmuth wouldn't make more Omnitrices, or even remove the original from its current user, then he would. A couple weeks passed, with Albedo working on replicating the device. He had the schematics, but there were pieces and components that the first thinker had kept to himself, meaning he had to fill in the gaps, or there was no chance the device would work. It would also mean that his version wouldn't be an exact copy. Still, he had managed to recreate the device. "I've finally done it!" Albedo said while holding up his replica Omnitrix, marveling at it. He was so proud of his accomplishment. The first thinker said it was impossible for him or anyone else to replicate it, but he did it! He'd proven the first thinker wrong. He had proven that he was smarter than Azmuth himself. "I have recreated the Omnitrix. After weeks of work and adjusting the designs, I'll finally show Azmuth that he was wrong. That having a child be in control of it is a mistake. That someone with a sufficient intellect should be the one to operate this device." Although, Testing the device is a crucial step as well, so I suppose that's my next step, he said to himself, pondering the implications. He had run simulations, made millions of small adjustments to complete the device. There was no way that it could fail now. It took him a long time to make, but he finished it. Albedo then attached the Omnitrix to himself, making sure it was calibrated correctly. He activated the dial, selected a random transformation, and activated the device. A green flash of light enveloped him. Once it subsided, the Galvan emerged from it as an aerophibian. Eureka! The device works! But the question still stands, will it only work as an aerophibian, or does it actually have the capacity of turning one into every alien in the listed catalogs? He asked himself, alone in the room. He hit the dial once more, changing into a Sonorosian. Then he became a Methanosian, then a Necrophrygian. All the transformations seemed to work, which means the device is correctly calibrated. He mumbled. He set the Omnitrix to turn into his default form and activated the device once more. Another flash of light emerged from his body. Once the light subsided, he had been turned into a Homo sapien. "What's the meaning of this?" he exclaimed, looking at his hands bewildered. He searched for a nearby reflective surface. Once he could see his face, it hit him. He had been turned into an exact genetic duplicate of the wielder of the Omnitrix, Izuku Midoriya. Had he made a mistake? A miscalculation? No. His math was perfect. It had to be Azmuth. He had to have been responsible for this. He started racking his brain, trying to think of how he could have done this, mumbling every word of his thought process. There's no gain in dwelling on how it happened now. What I need to focus on is finding a solution to my current dilemma, he concluded, deciding to focus on the solution instead of the problem. Knowing what the problem was, Albedo spent the next week and a half conducting tests on himself and his Omnitrix. He couldn't survive like this. The sweatiness and teary-eyedness did nothing but annoy him. The craving for foods he did not possess didn't help either. The one habit that the boy had that didn't annoy him was the mumbling. It was a good way for him to get his thoughts together and try to figure out a solution. Could I acquire the DNA of a Galvan to return to my form? No, that wouldn't work. I never implemented a scanner, so all available listings I have are the only transformations I will have. Buying the components could be hard as well, especially since I can't let anyone see me like this. I suppose trying to access the listing is a possibility as well, Albedo concluded after a while of mumbling. He stepped to one of his machines and connected his Omnitrix to it. He started looking through the database but found no extra DNA samples in his device. I see, yes. By cutting corners, I seem to have forgotten to add my own database of transformations. The only reason it currently works is that it's synced up with the original Omnitrix, Albedo mumbled. I suppose there's only one solution available to me. I must find the wielder of the original device and strip him of it. Then, I can use it to fix my current dilemma. Not to mention, use his Omnitrix to create more, or give it to a more worthy candidate. He didn't want anyone seeing him in this despicable, horrid form. So once night arrived, he sneaked to the outskirts of the city. There he prepared his incomplete device and activated it, turning into his aerophibian form. I doubt he would have left his home planet, so all I have to do is head to Terra Prime, Albedo said. He then jumped into the air, flying out of the planet's atmosphere rather quickly. Once he had reached the vacuum of space, he accelerated, traversing through the universe at incredible speeds. The planet he was heading to was light years away, but it only took him a couple of hours to arrive in his current form. Once he had reached the planet known as Terra Prime, or as the locals called it, Earth, Albedo headed to a big island and landed in some city's alleyway. Once he had landed, he hit the Omnitrix, turning back to the human form he had been stuck in for the past 2 weeks. If I'm not mistaken, and of course I'm not, this is the planet where the wielder of the Omnitrix resides. All I have to do now is locate him, Albedo said to himself. Should be easy enough given my advanced intellect. He made his way out of the alleyway. As he left, he spotted an abandoned cloak lying on the ground. It reeked, but Albedo figured it'd help him blend in more. In the places he'd been to outside of his home world, people were usually wearing cloaks for some reason. Once he stepped into the light, he spotted an altercation between a four-armed man and a big villain with a rocky body. "Get the fuck away, you damn narc!" the villain screamed as it punched down, trying to hit the four-armed man. He managed to jump back and evade the attack. The villain accidentally buried his hand in the ground, giving the four-armed man an opportunity to attack. "Ah, damn it, this guy's quirk is tough!" he screamed, hurting his fist upon impact. "Well, it isn't as tough as those two interns I had, so I can at least keep smashing." "Interesting," Albedo said to himself as he continued watching the unfolding fight. "That specimen seems to have some genetic diversity in him. There's probably a tetrament element in his DNA for him to have that many appendages. It's a wonder compared to this useless, sticky, itchy body." "I do wonder, is it an exception or the norm?" The man with the four arms kept hitting the villain over and over, but he didn't seem to do much. "Ha! That tickles!" the villain shouted, lifting his hands up with a lot of force. He cracked the ground apart, sending a punch of debris flying at the civilians who were watching the hero work. It seemed as though the debris was going to kill those people. His fourth kind wasn't fast enough to stop it from happening. Before those rocks hurt anyone, what looked like brown vines extended over the environment containing all of those rocks. "A Florana? Maybe a Methanosian?" Albedo wondered as he saw those vines. "You won't be harming anyone else today, villain," a man in a wooden suit said as he showed himself. "Canyon Cannon!" a giant woman shouted, kicking the villain away into a building. "Huh. I wonder if she has Tokustar DNA. Maybe Vaxasaurian?" Albedo mumbled as he continued watching. The Rocky Man jumped up. "Barely fell," he said, falling to the ground just as his sentence was cut short. "The villain is subdued," another man said, turning from what looked like a string back to a man. Turning around with his insides was easy enough. "Good job, Headshot," the man who seemed to be made of wood said. "Huh. This man must have Oreo DNA," Albedo said. "It is curious that they all seem to have these abilities. I do wonder where they originate from. It matters not. I should focus on the prize I seek. There must be some way for me to gather reconnaissance." "Hey you, adult human female," Albedo shouted, getting the attention of what looked like a 24-year-old woman. You mean me?" the woman asked. She seemed very weirded out at the way she had been addressed. "Yes. I do apologize if it is not the proper form to address others. I do not originate from this region," Albedo said, wanting to make the transaction as easy as possible. "I would like to request the location of a place that has access to information. Extranet access would be ideal." "You speak pretty well for an outsider," the woman said. He looked like a local and spoke pretty well for an outsider, but his word choices did give him away. "The closest thing I can think of is an internet cafe around the corner. Just keep going down the street and take a left, then keep going until you spot a giant sign." "Very much obliged," Albedo said as he went on his way. As he walked, he noticed that some of the humans in the area were disfigured in some regard, as if the DNA they possessed had been mutated. Some people were bigger, others smaller, but they had many discernible attributes that reminded Albedo of other species not native to the planet he was on. After 3 minutes of walking, he arrived at the place the woman had guided him to. He had a quick look around and started walking to what he deduced were primitive computing devices. "Hey you, where do you think you're going?" the clerk asked, seeing Albedo just waltz into his establishment. "I am searching for information and was guided here. I assume those devices serve the purpose I seek," he said, pointing at the computers. "If you want free stuff, go to a library. If you want to use the computers, you're gonna have to pay," the clerk said. "Oh, but of course," Albedo said, pulling out a few Taden from his pocket and handing them to the clerk. "I assume this will cover the cost?" "The hell is this?" the clerk shouted, tossing it back at Albedo. "If you want to use the computers here, you'll have to pay with actual money. We take yen, dollars, euros, and pounds." I do not have any of this currency, Albedo said. Then get out of here and don't come back unless you have some money. Go to a bank or something, the clerk shouted while pushing Albedo out of the shop. After being kicked out, Albedo searched for a way of making money. The people he asked directed him to a nearby ATM. Such primitive technology, he whispered. He did not know how to access the ATM properly. It didn't respond to voice, handprints, retinal scans, or no form of identification he had. So in the end, what he did was turn to his cerebral castration form and overload the circuitry without the people around him noticing. This gave him access to the machine's functions, so he pulled out a sum of money he thought would come in handy. He did not know how much was a lot or little, so he made it out with 5 10,000 yen bills. Having some money, he returned to the establishment where he rented out a booth for an hour, getting access to a drink of his choice as well. A quite primitive design, but it's easily discernible. The only issue is the characters. Fortunately, I implemented a universal translator into my Omnitrix, Albedo said to himself as he started typing. He had never used the internet before, but compared to the extranet, it was child's play. In seconds, he had already figured out how to surpass governmental and private firewalls. The first thing he did was search for the term extraterrestrial. All the results showed were mere conspiracy theories, so he varied his approach, searching for the term powers. Again, the information he found was irrelevant. He recalled the name of the hero from before, so he searched him up. On a site called Heropedia, he found out that his power, or as the Terrans called it, a quirk, was fold the body. He found the idea intriguing, so he looked further into it. He searched through multiple sites and theories, finding one that seemed to have a lot of validity to it. A long time ago, a scientist called Dr. Aloysius James Animo was researching undocumented species of animals in the Amazon rainforest when he came upon many dead blue wasp-like creatures with 2 pairs of wings and 4 legs. They had eyes with black sclea and green pupils. They also seemed strangely robotic. When performing an autopsy on one of the mysterious creatures, Aloysius found various DNA samples along with what seemed like a database. He decided to combine this new finding with his old research, experimenting in some rats with the DNA in the hopes of creating super animals. The doctor presented his findings to the scientific community, but was shunned for the nature of his experiments. When Aloysius discovered that he had lost his prize to Dr. Kelly, he threw a fit, accidentally knocking over the cage containing the rodents he had experimented on. They could not contain these creatures, and most of them escaped, mating with other members of the species. Due to the experiment's mutagenic nature, the genetics in all those rodents and their mates continued mutating. Eventually, this new virus the doctor had created spread from the rodents to humans, fundamentally changing their DNA. The new virus gave them abilities that ended up being dubbed quirks. As for the doctor himself, most information on him is unknown, but after his experiments, he was seized by an underground shadow government along with most of his research. He hasn't been seen or heard from since a couple days after the original incident. Huh, so that's what happened to that swarm, Albedo commented after reading the information he found on a classified government site. I always found it strange that Azmuth didn't manage to retrieve those drones and had to reattain the DNA samples. He took a sip from his drink, cracked his knuckles and said, "Now that my curiosity is satisfied, it is time to search for the wielder of the Omnitrix." He started combing the internet. First he searched for the word Omnitrix but found no helpful information. He then searched for the word Midoriya, but found a couple of different people with that name, including the intended recipient for the Omnitrix. While looking through the list of names, Albedo found a news article that had been written a couple days prior. The article was about how 2 sidekicks, Changeling and Lemillion, stopped a bank robbery a few days prior. In the article were some attached video feeds, which Albedo took a look at. There he didn't just see the Omnitrix, he saw the human using it, all to stop some simple heist. It was an incredible misuse of the device. It was meant for better things. Albedo was angered but kept on searching. He had the name of the hero, and thanks to some very dedicated fans, he found out where the child resided. He had only needed 27 minutes to gain all the information he needed, so he left the establishment, heading to where his prize would be. Meanwhile, in another part of the country, the raid on the Yakuza finished. As the members of the villain organization were being transported to Tartarus, the heroes headed to a nearby hospital where their injured were taken care of. Are you sure everything's alright? Izuku asked the doctor, looking at his trembling hand. You're a picture of health, the doctor answered, double-checking his test results. But if what you're telling me is true, and you actually died, then I'd advise you to talk to a therapist or go through counseling. But physically, you're free to go. After being told that, Midoriya left the room, meeting up with Aizawa outside. How's Eri? Midoriya asked. She had been fine after the battle with Overhaul, but as they were all heading to the hospital, she took a turn for the worse. She didn't know how to react to all that was happening, to living a life away from the Yakuza. All those conflicting emotions ended up manifesting a severe fever that caused her quirk to go haywire. Luckily, Aizawa was in the same ambulance, and although his reaction was slowed, he managed to cancel her quirk, stabilizing the situation. She's stable for now, but they have her quarantined for the time being, Aizawa explained. What did the doctor say? He gave me a perfect bill of health, Midoriya said. He said I'm allowed to go home already. What about the others? See for yourself, Aizawa said. Those are their rooms. Midoriya then walked over to them. I've done what I could, but I cannot heal him further. I'm sorry, Recovery Girl said, shaking her head in disappointment. My, this is quite troubling, Night Eye commented. Indeed, All Might added, as Midoriya opened the door. The moment Miro saw it open, he quickly turned around, hiding his back from the new visitors. He didn't want anyone else seeing the cracks that were starting to form on his body. Is everything alright? Midoriya asked, seeing a bandaged Night Eye checking up on Miro. Everything's A-okay! Just talking about the next step for the agency, Miro said, not wanting to reveal what was happening to him. Are you sure? What happened in the fight has me worried. You just stopped and started screaming. For a moment I thought you were going to die. Chisaki just got to me using his quirks. He used one of them in a weird way and made me hallucinate being impaled a bunch. It took me a bit to get used to it, Miro said, spouting out the first excuse he could come up with. Don't worry, I'll be fine. Midoriya, if you wouldn't mind, Miro and I have some important matters to discuss, Night Eye said, shooing the young hero out of the room with a glance. Midoriya obliged with the request and went to check up on Kirishima. He found him in fat gum covered in bandages. They spoke a bit about what happened, but the talk was interrupted by a doctor who wanted to take another x-ray of Kirishima. After checking up on him, Midoriya went to where Uraraka and Tsuyu were. He found them both asleep on 2 separate hospital beds. Midoriya was concerned about them, so he asked the nurse what was wrong with them. She explained that both students' life force had been drained, so they need to rest and recuperate. After checking up on everyone, Izuku prepared to leave the hospital, but he was stopped by Aizawa, who wouldn't permit it, saying that Midoriya had been through an ordeal and needed to talk it through. Midoriya spoke up about everything that troubled him, about his death, about the fight, and everything in between. Aizawa tried to help his student through the situation, but concluded that he wasn't qualified, so he told Midoriya to talk to the school counselor. After their talk finished, Midoriya asked to return home, a request which Aizawa accepted, allowing him to head home. Hello, young Midoriya. You heading back to UA? All Might asked as he bumped into Midoriya as he left the hospital. Ah! All Might! Yes, I am, Midoriya said, surprised that he bumped into his favorite hero. He thought he was just here to check up on Mirio. Want to share a cab then? All Might asked the student. Sure, Midoriya answered. He's back! Midoriya's back! Minato shouted after Izuku entered the dorms, still wearing his hero costume. School just ended recently, and everyone was chilling at the dorms before starting their afternoon activities. Hearing the call, everyone came rushing to the entrance to make sure their classmate was alright. "Are you okay? We were all worried," Yamomo said. "We saw everything on the news," Kaminari added. "It looked terrifying," Ashido commented. "Tell us everything," Aoyama said. "Are Tsuya and Uraraka okay? Where are they?" Hagakure asked. "Yeah, are they alright?" Mina added. Not knowing where to start, Izuku took a moment to compose himself and started speaking. "I am fine. I apologize for making you worry about me. The other two are alright. They will arrive shortly. I myself was allowed to return sooner because of special circumstances," he explained. "Why is that someone in our class is always getting caught in this stuff? Especially you?" Kaminari asked, concerned. "When will they be back?" Hagakure asked. After that comment, more and more students started swarming Midoriya, asking him many questions that he wasn't prepared to answer. "Enough of this!" Ida shouted, getting in between Izuku and the rest of the class. "I understand you were worried, but calm down. We've all seen the news footage and know through the ordeal our classmate has been. If you want to help, you should console him quietly and let him rest his body and mind, because I'm sure today wasn't taxing just physically, but mentally as well. The same applies for those who haven't arrived yet." "Thank you for your support, Ida. I'd like to take this time to rest in my quarters," Midoriya said, heading towards the stairs. "Hey, Deku," Bakugou said calmly. Something very odd for him to do, especially if it had to do with Izuku. Izuku didn't seem to react. Midoriya? Is everything alright? Bakugou's talking to you," Zero said. He was a bit confused as to why Midoriya was acting so weird, but given what he had been through, both he and the rest of the class didn't want to press the issue. "Yes, my apologies. I zoned out for a moment. What is it, Bakugou?" Midoriya asked. "Where are you heading?" Bakugou asked. "To my quarters, of course," Izuku answered. "Other way, nerd," Bakugou said, pointing to the stairs that led to the boys' side. "Oh, my mistake," Izuku said. "With the hecticness of the day, I seem to have forgotten." Midoriya then went up the stairs. He stopped at the second floor and walked towards the first closed door, reading the label. "Your room's the third door," Bakugou said as he went up the stairs himself. "Much appreciated, Bakugou," Midoriya said. Once things cooled down a bit and people started their afternoon activities, Bakugou went down to the second floor and knocked on Izuku's door. "Is there anything I could help you with, Bakugou?" Midoriya asked, opening the door. Bakugou grabbed Izuku by the collar of the costume and started dragging him. "Let go of me this instant!" Izuku demanded, struggling to free himself from Bakugou's grasp. "We need to talk, so come with me," Bakugou said. "Fine, but you needn't be aggressive about it," Izuku said, following behind Bakugou. Midoriya followed behind Bakugou, walking all the way to Trading Ground Gamma, a place where they wouldn't be interrupted. "You wanted to converse with me, Bakugou?" Midoriya asked. "I'd much rather talk to Deku about this, but that does raise the question. Who are you and what have you done with him?" Bakugou asked, having noticed something off with Izuku ever since he returned from the raid. The way he talked and his mannerisms were all irregular, but the biggest giveaway was that he was calling Bakugou by his actual name. "Whatever do you mean, Bakugou? I have done nothing with Midoriya. I am him," Midoriya responded. "Cut the bullshit," Bakugou said as he started stretching. "This is not humorous, Bakugou. It's best you start saying what you wish to say and for us to return to our domicile," Albedo said, still trying to stop things from escalating. He did not want a confrontation before he could retrieve the Omnitrix. Waiting for Izuku Midoriya in his room until he returned was his best strategy, but he couldn't arouse suspicion either. "Fine," Bakugou said. But before anyone had a chance to speak again, Bakugou rushed Albedo, throwing a gigantic explosion at him. Seconds before the explosion was launched, Albedo saw Bakugou rushing at him. He transformed into Ice Wing, letting the explosion pass through him. Calm down, Bakugou. Just stop. We can talk this through, Midoriya said, trying to appease his classmate. Shut it. You ain't Deku. Who are you? Bakugou demanded to know. Midoriya let out a small sigh and spoke up. What gave me away? And that's the end of the video. As always, I hope you enjoyed. If you did, don't forget to hit a like, subscribe, and leave a comment. I actually have a question for you guys. If you could see any transformation that does not have an ultimate get an ultimate, which ultimate form would you like to see the most? And what powers and or modifications do you think that ultimate would have? It's a genuine question that I'm usually very curious about, since a lot of people have a lot of different ideas, and who knows, if I see any interesting ones, I might use them in the series. Yes. I hope you're enjoying the Albedo arc, or the start from this. Next episode, we're gonna get the end, the confrontation, and everything in between. So, yes. Hope you enjoyed, and until next time, everyone, have an absolutely fantastic day. Bye!